73rd World Health Assembly began on Monday, with world leaders convening virtually for the first time due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Brazil now ranks 5th in the world in terms of the number of coronavirus cases reported at over 240,000. India has extended its lockdown until the end of May, following the biggest single-day jump in cases in the country. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. The 73rd World Health Assembly began on Monday, with global leaders convening virtually for the first time due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The ambassador of the Bahamas to the UN, Kiva Bain, was elected to serve as president of the Assembly.
We convene the 73rd Assembly during an unprecedented time in history, when the global community is faced with negative health, social, and economic effects of the spread of the coronavirus. And the Assembly convened virtually, bringing together participants from across the globe. The public health community has faced challenges in the past. Global health issues transcend national boundaries and governments and call for action on the part of the global forces that determine the health of people.
And in this context, Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, offered statements on the situation in her country and the Caribbean region.
Our CARICOM heads of government adopted a whole-of-government and a whole-of-society approach. In addition, we reached to our Caribbean neighbor Cuba and received hundreds of doctors and nurses to help us. I take this opportunity to thank our brothers and sisters in Cuba and the government of the Republic of Cuba in particular for its unswerving assistance during this pandemic. It has been palpable and clear to all of our population. So, our CARICOM family banded together to lock down and ride out this first wave. And it has been a long and treacherous wave. The closing of our borders and the trebling of unemployment and the reduction of our government revenues by half have created grave challenges for many of us. Similarly, the psyche of people in our hemisphere has been disturbed. For the majority of persons under the age of 70 in the Caribbean, many of whom have never had to confront grave challenges, the world appears to be on autopilot. They wonder who is in control and where is the leadership? Where is the global cooperation that they so expected? And for too many of our citizens globally, life has become a game of roulette, betting on numbers and colors and ignoring the science that needs to underpin our actions.
And Cuba's Minister of Health outlined the country's experience in fighting COVID-19, noting that the crisis had become an opportunity for global solidarity. He also stressed that the US blockade has failed to stifle Cuba's international medical cooperation.
This was not prevented by the genocidal blockade imposed by the United States against Cuba, which has been cruelly stepped up, nor the attempts of the government of this country to discredit and hinder medical cooperation from Cuba. President, no country can face this crisis alone. There needs to be a world-level response based on unity, solidarity, and multilateral cooperation. Cuba reiterates to the WHO and its member states its willingness to cooperate and share our modest experience. Thank you.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa stressed that Africa is extremely vulnerable to COVID-19 and the poorest worldwide are suffering the most. He added that all nations must have equal access to medical technologies and stressed the importance of international solidarity.
South Africa is participating in several research initiatives. We must ensure that there is equitable access to medical equipment, technologies, in all respects. In this final decade towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, we must press ahead with our goal of making universal health care a reality for all the people of the world, and no one must be left behind. The virus has demonstrated the essential value of universal health coverage And this is where we need full solidarity.
Chinese President Xi Jinping reiterated support for the World Health Organization and stressed China's response to the global coronavirus pandemic.
China will provide $2 billion over 2 years to help with COVID-19 response and with economic and social development in affected countries, especially developing countries. China will establish a cooperation mechanism for its hospitals to pair up with 30 African hospitals and accelerate the building of the African CDC headquarters to help the continent ramp up its disease preparedness and control capacity.
And the Director General of the World Health Organization defended the agency's response to the coronavirus pandemic. He stressed that while the world does not have the resources to protect itself from pandemics, these need to be used accordingly to ensure that a similar crisis is not repeated.
I'm calling on all nations to resolve that they will do everything it takes to ensure that the 2020 coronavirus pandemic is never repeated. I'm calling on all nations to invest in strengthening and implementing the many tools at our disposal, especially the global treaty that underpins global health security, the international health regulations. To be successful, we must all commit to mutual ownership and accountability.
The Brazilian Health Ministry reported on Sunday that the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the country had surpassed 240,000. According to the latest report, the virus has killed over 16,000 people in Brazil. The state of Sao Paulo, one of the worst hit regions in the country, now has more than 60,000 confirmed cases and has reported nearly 5,000 deaths. But the Municipal Health Bureau of the state capital announced on Sunday that there had been a 400% increase in COVID-19 deaths from April 9th to May 15th in the city of Sao Paulo, and warned that the public health system could collapse within 15 days unless stricter quarantine and social distancing measures were adopted. Brazil's daily rise in new COVID-19 cases has remained above 10,000 since Wednesday last week. The country now ranks 5th in the world in terms of the number of cases reported. Cuban ambassador to Peru, Sergio González, announced on Sunday the arrival of a Cuban medical brigade to assist in the fight against the coronavirus. Peruvian Prime Minister Vicente Ceballos explained that his government had presented a formal request for medical assistance to the Cuban government about 3 weeks ago, which was accepted. The Cuban Medical Brigade is made up of 85 doctors, while medical equipment and health supplies were also provided. The Prime Minister added that the Cuban doctors are expected to focus their efforts in the most affected regions of the country. Peru remains the second worst hit nation in Latin America, with over 92,000 cases and more than 2,600 fatalities. More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The Venezuelan government has revealed new evidence that directly links opposition lawmaker Juan Guaidó to a document signed with U.S. security company Silvercorp USA. Vice President for Communications Jorge Rodriguez denounced the opposition lawmaker for continuously attempting against national sovereignty and promoting foreign intervention. Rodriguez revealed more evidence that demonstrates the close relationship between U.S. President Donald Trump, Colombian President Ivan Duque, and extremist Venezuelan opposition groups linked to Colombian drug traffickers. The Venezuelan vice president stressed that this criminal triangle continues to conspire against the country.
That's the criminal triangle that includes the U.S. administration, that includes the Duque government, that includes Juan Guaidó and his henchmen, and also includes notorious Colombian drug lords and at least one Venezuelan drug trafficker.
The United States continues to lead the world in terms of both the number of COVID-19 cases and deaths reported. The United States accounts for about 4.25% of the world's population, but currently has about 29% of confirmed COVID-19 fatalities worldwide at over 91,000. Models used by the White House suggest the death toll could rise to around 147,000 by early August. The state of New York remains the worst hit in the country, with over 193,000 cases and more than 15,000 deaths. However, there are some signs of hope, with the death rate slowing in New York. Meanwhile, Texas, one of the first states to reopen its economy, recorded its highest new caseload yet. According to a study, as many as 6 million people in the United Kingdom fear losing their job within 6 months due to the coronavirus pandemic. The survey also found that 60% of workers are at most 3 months away from rent or mortgage default. The report follows evidence that almost a third of Britain's lowest paid workers have lost their job or been furloughed in the past 2 months, while job losses are starting to rise for those missing out on the limited government support schemes. The inequalities exposed by the COVID-19 crisis also appear to be shaping public opinion, with the study finding widespread public support for giving key workers, including National Health Service staff, care workers, shop workers and delivery drivers, a pay rise. In addition, 69% of those polled supported taxing the rich more to help pay for the crisis. The UK ranks 4th in the world in terms of the number of coronavirus cases confirmed, at over 240,000. And meanwhile, commuters at London's Euston Station expressed concern as the UK government eased the coronavirus lockdown restrictions and encouraged people to return to work.
Still the train, yeah, because it's direct and easier to get to the hospital.
Do you work in a hospital?
Yes, yeah, I'm a nurse, yeah.
So have you been working?
Yeah, I've been working continuously, so today's the busiest day that I've known it, so yeah.
Are you worried about it getting busier?
A little bit today looking around, yeah, but I have to do my job, so yeah.
At the moment, the way I see quite is a little bit difficult. I'm not feeling, safe because there's still people are quite a lot and there's no space really people to give a social distance because of course since this restriction of the lockdown is a little bit, so many people crammed up.
The daily rise in COVID-19 deaths in Spain fell to 59 this Monday, representing the second consecutive day that the figures were below 100. Following the Spanish government's decision to move part of the country to phase 1 of de-escalation of the lockdown last Monday, today sees the rest of the regions doing so, except for Madrid, Barcelona and some areas of Castile and Leon. Meanwhile, according to a statement by Transport Minister José Luis Ábalos, the country aims to reopen its borders to visitors around the end of June as its coronavirus lockdown fully winds down. Spain is one of the hardest hit nations in the world, having reported over 278,000 cases and over 27,000 deaths. The Italian government has lifted further coronavirus lockdown restrictions despite reporting the third highest death toll in the world after the United States and the United Kingdom. On Monday, restaurants, bars and cafes across Italy were reopened as part of Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte's plan to resume most economic activities and lift restrictions on people's movements. Museums, galleries, clothing stores, hairdressers, churches and other religious sites also reopened, but must comply with strict safety protocols and social distancing measures. Travel restrictions have also been lifted, with inter-regional travel resuming, while European travellers will be allowed to enter the country without having to undergo quarantine beginning in June. Russia confirmed almost 9,000 new coronavirus cases on Monday, bringing the total to over 290,000 and representing a possible slowdown in the infection rate. On Sunday, Russia took second place in the world in terms of the number of cases reported, behind the United States. However, its death toll is very low compared to the number of cases, which authorities say is due to widespread testing. According to Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin, 27 of Russia's 85 regions are ready to start gradually easing coronavirus restrictions.
The situation in the country with the spread of the coronavirus remains quite challenging, although we can see that we have been able to halt the growth of the incidence rate. Of course, the strict lockdown measures played a part, helping us win time and prevent the incidence rate from skyrocketing, as was the case in a number of other countries.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel announced on Monday that she and French President Emmanuel Macron are proposing a €500 billion fund to finance the relaunch of the European Union's economy, which is facing its biggest post-war crisis yet due to the coronavirus pandemic.
Europe must show solidarity. That is why it's a question of having a rapid economic recovery, and that is why we want to set up a temporary fund of €500 billion. The EU should provide budgetary expenditure, that is to say, not loans, but budgetary expenditure for the sectors and regions most affected.
Sur le plan sanitaire,
in terms of health, it is our common desire to provide Europe with very concrete competencies in health matters and to work together with common stocks of masks or tests, common or coordinated purchasing capacities for treatment and vaccine, shared epidemic prevention plans, common methods for recording and identifying cases. This Europe of health has never existed. It must become our priority.
And we're taking one last short break now, but stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. China's National Health Commission confirmed 7 new coronavirus cases this Monday. Chinese health authorities identified 4 imported cases in the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region and 3 local cases in Jilin Province and Shanghai Municipality. The National Health Commission also announced that 11 patients had been discharged from hospital and no further COVID-19 deaths have been reported. Meanwhile, the Wuhan Health Commission announced an increase in testing to identify the number of asymptomatic cases. The total number of confirmed cases in China has now reached almost 83,000, of which over 78,000 patients have recovered. The Japanese economy has officially entered recession for the first time since 2015 due to the coronavirus pandemic. According to official data, gross domestic product contracted by 3.4% in the first quarter of the year as private consumption, capital expenditure and exports fell. Meanwhile, top economists have warned that the current quarter is likely to see an even deeper decline due to the lockdown measures. According to the Ministry of Health, Labour and Welfare, Japan has identified more than 16,000 coronavirus cases and over 700 COVID-19 deaths. Residents in New Delhi have reacted to India's extension of its coronavirus lockdown until the end of May, following the biggest single-day jump in cases in the country. The Indian lockdown, considered the world's largest, affects 1.3 billion people and has been devastating for India's poor, with millions of migrant workers losing their jobs. This is the 4th time the federal government has extended the lockdown, but some restrictions have been lifted. India has reported over 100,000 coronavirus cases.
The situation is such that people have to manage their funds also, so they aren't coming out to buy anything, because what I sell doesn't fall under essential necessities. Right now, people are buying only food because it's uncertain how long this situation will continue. I'm from Uttar Pradesh, and I've been sitting at home for 2 months. I don't have any food left at home, so I had to open my shop today after 2 months. I don't have any food or water, my bank account is empty. I don't have a ration card to my name either, so I decided to open my shop.
At least 20 civilians were killed in an overnight raid on a village in the northeast of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. According to local authorities, the massacre in the province of Ituri was orchestrated by militia members of the Cooperative for the Development of the Congo. The attackers fled after UN peacekeepers arrived at the village and later fired at a nearby UN base. Fighting by an array of armed groups in the region has complicated the country's response to the coronavirus pandemic. Authorities have reported over 1,500 COVID-19 cases and 61 fatalities. Jordanian and Palestinian officials are considering taking simultaneous action, including the suspension of their respective agreements with Israel in response to Israeli plans to annex the occupied territories. Ahmed Deek, director of the Office of the Palestinian Foreign Minister, stated that Jordan and Palestine are working in close coordination on a response to what is considered the theft of Palestinian land. Meanwhile, Najib Kaddoumi, a member of the Palestinian National Council, stressed that all options are open, including the suspension of both the Jordan-Israel Peace Treaty of 1984 and the Declaration of Principles signed by the PLO and Israel in 1993. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas warned in a recent speech that if any Palestinian land is annexed, there will be no reason to uphold the Oslo Accords and the PLO will be freed from all its commitments to any agreements. Nigerian authorities announced on Sunday that they had impounded a British aircraft for violating coronavirus lockdown restrictions. According to a tweet by Sirika Hadi, Nigeria's Federal Minister of Aviation, UK-based company Flair Aviation was granted approval to fly only for humanitarian operations, but was caught conducting commercial flights. Hadi added that the aircraft crew were interrogated and would face a maximum penalty. Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari met with the COVID-19 Presidential Task Force team on Sunday evening for a weekly briefing and reported that the West African country has confirmed nearly 6,000 cases and a death toll of 182.
Chairman of the union says relaxing the lockdown may not have been the best option.
Madagascar announced its first COVID-19 death on Sunday, nearly 2 months after the virus was first identified in the country. A coronavirus task force spokesperson reported that the victim was a 57-year-old medical worker from the city of Toamasini. The Indian Ocean island also reported 21 new cases, bringing the total to 304. The first death comes weeks after the country's president, Andrei Rajoelina, launched COVID Organics, an organic herbal drink he claimed can prevent or cure coronavirus patients. The WHO warned against the use of the drink without medical supervision and cautioned against self-medication. And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.